So this is the source of a lot of the information we'll be talking about today. And it probably helps to zoom out a little bit before we get into the nuances of formative usability testing, which, as defined in the textbook, really is testing for a medical device while it's still in the development process. So we'll be focusing on that. But first, let's zoom out a little bit. Let's just understand what is human factors. Because even the idea around usability, which is defined by human factors, can be somewhat of a mystery for medical device developers. Traditionally, human factors tends to crop up around that time when you're validating something as part of your submissions. And one of the key components here is that human factors it's not a step. It's something that happens throughout the entire process, from the very beginning, when you're defining what a device is, what's intended to be used for, who its intended users are, all the way through the design and validation and submittal stages. So thinking of it as a process is perhaps the first step toward really truly accounting for usability in your medical device development. So human factors is a function of understanding the device and our users and the environment of use. And it's very critical to understand all three of these because they're all interrelated. Just looking at a device or just looking at a user population alone really occludes a lot of compelling and critical information to understand relative to defining something that can be safe. And so if you're not doing any kind of research relative to understanding, observing, and interacting with users in the environment of use, you're not really kind of following what the FDA is looking for relative to mitigating user risk in your devices. When we talk about a user, it's very, very critical to be mindful of the potentially diverse, distinct user populations that might utilize your medical device. In the case of a pacemaker programmer, which is in the middle here, it might be considered to be doing a pretty thorough job of canvassing your user population if you talk to an implanting physician. And if this is all you talk to relative to developing your device, you're talking to about 4% of your user population. You really need to be talking to nurses as well. They really constitute about 80% of the use of this device. And you want to make sure you're not just talking to your expert nurse users, because there will be novice users or inexperienced users or first-time users who will also be interacting with your device. And this is all a component of understanding what is going to happen once your device has been commercialized in the context of defining potential errors and mitigating them through your device design. So in general, we recommend really kind of liberally defining who your user population are to solicit those points of view and those inputs in developing your user risk mitigation strategy. Really quickly, different dimensions of usability. It's more than just those physical components of how big is my hand, how far is my reach, how much can I lift, what can I hear. It also includes how we learn things, how our short-term and long-term memory works, so our abilities from a cognitive perspective. It includes our state of being, so what is our physical condition? If we're developing something that will be a self-administrative device used by patients, what aspects of their disease state do we need to take into account in order to make sure we're developing something that's safe? What are our emotional attitudes toward approaching interrelations with medical devices? And then lastly, our experience level. We are all creatures of habit, so many times innovation looks to rethink the way we do things, and that can be a great source of potential errors. Remember earlier we mentioned that formative evaluations are conducted while the design of the device is currently in progress. And there are a number of different goals for formative evaluations that are very, very critical. First, it's to guide further modification of the device design. You can do all the research in the world prior to initiating design, but you won't find out everything. And in many cases, some of the things you might consider doing as part of a new design will be new to the world. So there's no way you could find out about it before you start to conceive some potential solutions. So this is really about early stage feedback before you've locked down to a design, sharing ideas and workflows and novel approaches with users to gain that guidance into identifying how the design should ultimately be commercialized. So it's also a great tool to help identify and prioritize tasks, identify further risks. It really helps in guiding the development of scenarios that will be employed during your validation testing. So during that usability validation testing, you determine what that is. There is no rule book. per se, that determines what your validation testing needs to be. This serves as a traceability component so that you can rationalize why you've defined what your validation testing is. So up on screen now is a list. This was pulled from some, I think, FDA guidance a couple of years ago. The top 11 reasons why the FDA rejects submissions. There it is, no description of formative testing work. We want to be traceable in everything that we do. And when you submit something to the FDA for approval, you need to have that usability validation. There will be reviewers that will take a look at how you decided to validate your device and validate the usability of it. And if you don't have any formative work from which you can trace back to determine why you believe the validation test that you designed is sufficient in determining whether or not your device is safe, there will be some eyebrows being raised and there will be some questions asked. So in summary, formative usability testing informs product design and process, and it's very useful even beyond what regulatory is looking for. Formative usability testing provides that blueprint for what will ultimately comprise your final usability validation, but you have a lot of latitude in determining how you implement this. It's really a tool to help you, and there's a lot of different ways you can implement it. And then lastly, the things that you learn from formative usability testing move far beyond what just the FDA is looking for to really help you develop better, more intuitive, more usable, and more commercially successful devices.